This meeting is now being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lenita Hartman. With me in the room today, I have Beth Cole and Christy Scott, Ashley Ness, and Monica Harrington. Welcome to our first call of 2018. We're going to be talking about billing and funding, as well as sharing some updates about the unicorn and some legislative updates as well. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Beth.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to start out with some reminders of some things that are coming. The end of this month, on January 26th, we have another Medicaid enrollment fair. This time it's going to be at Imagine. And so far I only have like 4 or 5 people who have RSVP'd. So if you have providers who still need to enroll with Medicaid, or if they're having challenges with enrolling with Medicaid, please, please, please have them come to this enrollment fair, but have them RSVP to me so that we know who will be coming. Also, there is a group of us who are working on what we're calling an EI standard of practice, and this is regarding documentation. And this is the documentation that should be collected or produced for any child in early intervention, regardless of their funding source. It essentially follows the guidelines that are necessary for Medicaid and private insurance, but it also follows the guidelines that are set forth for documentation by ASHA and AOTA and APTA. So it really is following all of those guidelines. In addition, we are working on examples of evaluation forms and treatment notes that both align with the IFSP, are family-friendly and have family-friendly language, as well as having a section that you can provide to the families for strategies, and that would still be acceptable for billing Medicaid or private insurance. We're hoping to have this available this month. It depends on getting a couple of clarifications and then finalizing the examples and then sending it through clearance. We are also working on a billing training, and this is for providers or CCBs who are doing the billing, and it covers billing private insurance because private insurance has to be accessed if a child has both private insurance and Medicaid. So we touch on billing private insurance, primarily not as an in-network provider, but as an out-of-network provider, how to build Medicaid, and how to build a trust, and how all of those intersect, and the timing of things, as well as some of the details of documentation and requesting PARs and stuff like that. Again, we hope to have this available by the end of this month. And that's a web-based training that we will schedule at least one training that we can record and have available for future use for providers. In addition to making sure that your providers are enrolling in Medicaid, if you're hearing from providers that they're having difficulty, or if you are having difficulty enrolling your providers, let me know what's going on. I can't help you fix it, or I can't help the providers fix it if I don't know what's going on. Same thing with the billing. If the providers are having difficulty billing or obtaining PARs, let me know, and let me know sooner rather than later, because Medicaid is 100% on board with us to try and help fix these issues. But again, we need to provide them with information so that they can help resolve issues. Also, I need a status from every CCB in terms of how many of your providers have actually submitted their enrollment to Medicaid by the 15th of this month. And I need a list from all of you of your providers who have submitted an application but are not yet active. Because, again, Medicaid has committed to working with those providers to expedite getting their enrollments through. So the EI providers who are delivering allowable services paid by Medicaid may also bill the CCB for 1 unit per session for services that aren't allowable under Medicaid. So that would be a speech therapist who is providing sensory strategies to a family, or a PT who is providing communication strategies to the families. This is acknowledging that when a provider is in the home, they are looking at the child holistically and working with the child and family in a holistic manner. However, again, it's only 1 unit that they can bill. And that was outlined in a communication brief that's dated July 5th of 2016. You still need documentation supporting that payment, but that should be in the progress notes or the treatment notes. And that's to ensure that the CCB is billing accurately. And speaking of billing accurately, make sure that your billing is accurate in the unicorn for IFSP meetings, evaluations, travel, and interpreters. Those are all, should not be billed as a session. They need to be billed as IFSP meetings and evaluations are billed as transactions. Travel and interpreter are billed as session other. When I pull the Medicaid reports that I'm sending to each of you every month, I am only billing the actual SLP, PT, OT sessions. I am not pulling travel, interpreter, or meetings. So if you're billing those incorrectly, they're getting pulled into my report. Same thing with no-show. No-show is a session other. Again, treatment notes need to be accessed or available for every single visit that a provider bills the CCB, and this includes no-shows. And I'm not saying that the CCBs have to require the providers to send them the notes, because I know you may not have room to archive the notes, but you need to be able to go back to a provider and say, I need to see the note for this date of service, and the provider must be able to provide that note. So it's a good idea that you, at least a couple times a year, spot check and get providers to send you those notes. And this is the way to verify that they are billing for the accurate date of service. Other questions?
We have a question in the chat. So do our interpreters need to create a treatment note?
No, because they are part of the session. That is not their job to create a treatment note. Another question?
Okay, another question is, I thought NS was a transaction.
No-show.
No-show.
Is that a transaction?
I'd have to go back and double check. I can check on that.
Well, whether it's a session other or a transaction, it is not to be billed as like an SLP session. And then no-show marked in the description. It needs to be billed separately so it doesn't get pulled into those Medicaid reports that I'm pulling for you all.
Okay, so clarification, if in there is a transaction.
Okay. We will double check. It's either session other or transaction, but it should not be billed as a session. Did you further the slides? Okay. So Another, more reminders, when a child reaches the age of 3, a provider may not be paid for services delivered on or after the child's 3rd birthday. And that's not anything new. It's just that the system doesn't currently have a validation rule that prevents you from billing after a child's 3rd birthday. So we're relying on you all to really be aware that a child has reached their 3rd birthday and you cannot bill for any visits. Any visits that are inadvertently billed for the child after their 3rd birthday must be backed out of the billing. Moving on to funding. Right now, our money is in short supply, so it's really critical that every CCB make every effort to access all of the funding sources, private insurance, Medicaid, and the trust. And prior to accessing state or Part C funds, the correct funding source really needs to be accessed. CCBs should have documentation of denials from Medicaid or insurance if a child is enrolled and you're using state or Part C funds for their services. And the coordinated system of payment, sort of the funding hierarchy, is in the FMAP. If you need to refresh yourself on what those funding levels are, what comes first and what comes next. Is there a question? Okay. So when a child trust program ends, Nicole Honeycutt has 90 days to reconcile all of the billing and pay back the insurance company for whatever unused funds, whatever funds haven't been used. So when you are doing billing for the trust, you must make sure that all of your billings are submitted, or if they need to be backed out, that they're backed out within that 90 days after the program ends or after the child turns 3. Because if you wait longer, you know, if it's 6 months later and you realize, oh, we should have backed these out, then it's a really messy situation, because what ends up happening is you might back them out of the system, but then you're going to have to actually pay the insurance company back directly. So it's better if you just keep on top of things and make sure that everything is put in a timely fashion. And when you are backing billings out of the trust, you need to make sure that the trust box is checked. Otherwise, if it's not checked, you're backing the billing out of state funds. So if it was billed to the trust, you need to make sure that it's backed out of the trust. Also, in order to bill for service coordination, you need to make sure that the trust box is also checked. Otherwise, the service coordination for trust will be being paid by state funds. So it's these details that we want to make sure it's coming from the right place. For children who are enrolled in Medicaid and are receiving a Medicaid allowable service, Medicaid must be billed. And that is, moving forward, that's how it has to happen. And make sure you're billing TCM activities for your children who are enrolled in Medicaid, because that is a funding source for your case management, for your service coordination, that isn't being fully accessed by all CCBs. So again, for providers who aren't getting paid by Medicaid due to missing PARs or are having issues with billing, currently Medicaid is allowing providers to backdate their PAR all the way back to July. So really, you need to take advantage of this and go back, and providers have to go back and bill for those services and create PARs. Again, because we need to be using those funding sources so that we are truly following the funding hierarchy.
All guests have been unmuted.
That's one noise.
Okay, so we have a couple questions. Let's go ahead and mute everyone. We're getting some feedback.
All guests have been muted.
If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Okay, so what happens if we have a child that is on Medicaid who is in DI services?
DI is not an allowable Medicaid service, so following Medicaid and billing Medicaid doesn't even apply.
Okay, so Sue Litton wanted us to repeat something. I'm sorry, Sue. Were you asking about providers who were not getting paid due to missing PARs? Go ahead. Yeah. So currently Medicaid is allowing providers to backdate their PARs to July of 2017.
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully that answers that for you. Okay. I have a question about PARs. We are not able to get a PAR using only the IFSP. I thought we were going to be able to use just the IFSP, not a doctor's signature.
Some CCVs are actually getting PARs, and providers are actually getting PARs just using the IFSP. The detail is that the IFSP has to have all of the required signatures. So on the signature page, if it says required, if there's not a signature there, then the PAR won't work to get, the IFSP won't work to get the PAR. So you need to make sure that the IFSP you're submitting with the PAR has all the signatures, and then it should work.
So Beth, if they do submit the IFSP and it has all the required signatures and they're still not getting a PAR, what should they do?
Contact me and send me the IFSP and your NPI number, and also before you do that, call the helpline and ask what the issue is, because Medicaid is always going to ask me if you guys have actually double-checked or gone through their processes first before connecting with me.
Okay. So just for clarification, we can only back bill to July 2017 for services.
Technically, at this point in time, you can go back 364 days and bill for services. We're going to send detailed information. Gina Robinson from Medicaid is putting together one page. This is how you back bill information, and as soon as we get that from her, we'll send it out. But technically, you can go back 364 days.
So our clarification was just around providers not getting paid by Medicaid due to missing PARs. That piece, they're allowing you to go back and backdate the PAR to July 2017.
Right now, we are primarily focusing on this fiscal year, which is why we're emphasizing July 1st of 2017.
Okay. So Jody has a follow-up question to the IFSP question. Mm-hmm. Does it need to be an OT signature to get an OT PAR?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. What happens when a child is on a high deductible insurance? Family has to pay, example, $5,000 before their insurance will pay. Would we still have the provider bill insurance?
That's a very sticky issue that we haven't quite figured out our guidance on yet, in light of what we're being told by our higher-ups. So I will work with Christy to put together clear guidance about those high deductible plans because you're going to end up spending more money paying for the high deductible than you will just paying it out of state and Part C funds.
So a follow-up question to, does it need to be an OT signature to get an OT PAR? What if there wasn't an OT participating in the IFSP development?
Let me check with Gina and see what the guidelines are around that and using the IFSP to obtain a PAR.
Okay, because that's the issue is that there might not be an OT at the initial, but the OT is assigned, then they need the doc's signature. And
right.
So that's,
right.
That's hampering the process. Okay, so please explain a PAR in the EI world.
It's the same as it is for any OT or PT service. You need to submit the codes you're going to bill and the approximate number of units that you think you're going to need, and you can submit a PAR for up to 364 days. So when thinking about how many units you're going to use, you need to think, how many units am I going to use for a whole year of this particular code? You need to submit the IFSP or an evaluation and a doctor's prescription, and just follow the process that's in the OTPT billing manual. That's on the Medicaid website.
Okay, and then there's an observation. Again, this is a problem with the EI model and Medicaid, you know, some of these things. And we recognize that, and these are things that we are working through with ICPUF. And Beth is hard at work at doing that. Okay. One more. Are providers going to be submitting their own PARs, or will the CCB still be doing that?
That's up to each CCB. If you're going to be doing the billing for the provider, then you would submit, the CCB would submit the PAR. But if providers are doing the billing on their own, then the provider would submit the PAR.
Okay, any final questions around this issue before we move on? Yes, okay. Will you clarify that if a provider wasn't a Medicaid provider 364 days ago, can we still go back 364? Or can we only go back to the date the date of the provider's Medicaid application?
I believe that Gina said that a provider, they're backdating the provider's application date and eligibility date to, I think, like 364 days. And so they should be able to go back and bill. And that'll be part of the information that we send out regarding the back billing.
Okay.
But again, if people are having problems, let me know.
Are providers asking for additional pay to do their own billing? Are we hearing that?
No.
Whitney is sharing there's also a backdate form on the HCPUF website for providers.
Yeah.
So they can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Whitney.
Okay, let's see. So the 15th is Monday, which is a holiday. Can CCBs have through the 19th to get their list to you?
Yes.
Can you please review TCM and EI? When can we bill for TCM and when not? Thank you.
You can bill for TCM. Are you asking about at what point you can start billing? The requirements for billing TCM are that the child is eligible, is active in the Medicaid system, and is eligible for early intervention. So as soon as the child has been determined eligible for EI and you've confirmed that they are enrolled in Medicaid and active in Medicaid, then you can start billing for TCM activities. I'm not sure if that
Which are outlined in detail in the FNAP,
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and they have to have an IFSP, so when they're determined eligible, correct? It's not just determined eligible, it's that they...
The eligibility page of the IFSP needs to be signed so that the families understand that their child is eligible and how.
Okay, so previous communication brief indicated we needed to have the HIAF signed, not just the eligibility determination. We need that signed first, correct?
Yeah, because that's how you verify that the child is eligible for Medicaid.
You're having a conversation with the family. You're informing them that their child is eligible for early intervention services and what that means. You're confirming that they are enrolled in Medicaid and that they are allowing you to share their personally identifiable information in order to bill TCM. And you're filling out the eligibility page, which is essentially the start date of your IFSP. All of those things need to be in place in order to bill TCM.
So if we get the eligibility page signed at evaluation, can we bill TCM when going back to finish the IFSP?
Yes.
Yep. The communication brief indicated a signature was needed, not just verbal consent.
For what?
Either through email on the HIAF.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct. Yes, the signature is needed.
Okay. If you guys have more questions, please contact Beth. She's more than willing to share information and provide you with some guidance. And then the HIAF is the Health Insurance Authorization Form. Okay?
Yeah.
One more.
One more question, and then we can move on. Does Medicaid pay for DOEs?
I'm not
Please
sure
clarify what a DOE
is.
Is that not eligible?
Oh, is that the
Determination of eligibility. No.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Determination of eligibility.
No.
Okay.
Medicaid does not pay for determination of eligibility.
Correct.
Okay. We're going to move on.
All right, this is Ashley Ness here, and we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about the provider portal. So the portal go-live date has been pushed back. It was set to go live this coming Monday, but the new date is going to be February 5th. So that is the new date. This has to do that it was pushed back due to this is a pretty heavy lift, and our developers just needed a little bit of extra time making sure that everything is in place by the go-live. Providers and service coordinators should not be entering or uploading information into the EI provider database. If you have information that needs to be uploaded to that, just hold on to it, and you will be able to upload all information February 5th into the new portal. So data will be migrating from the EI provider database into the new portal, and this actually started last week. So on January 5th is when it started, and it will be set to wrap on February 5th. So all information that was entered by the 5th will be migrated into the new portal by February 5th. And the portal is currently being tested. So our developers are in there testing it right now. Once they are complete with the testing, then EI Colorado will begin the testing. We do have some availability for CCB users to test. That will begin January 29th and will be complete by February 2nd. So it's a kind of a tight timeline. If you are interested in testing the portal, please contact me. We do need some CCB users to get in there and test it to make sure that it is working. You'll also be able to get a sneak peek of how the portal is going to work. So it's pretty cool. We're really excited that this is happening. Providers will continue to be responsible for keeping all of their information updated in the new portal.
You have a question in the chat. Will there be a user guide for the difference between the systems? For example, in the provider database, I was never able to deactivate providers that were no longer active within the agency.
Yeah, so we will get out a user guide, and then we're actually going to post kind of a YouTube tutorial so users can actually see how to access the portal and how to use it. It will be it'll be much more user-friendly for users to go in, and if they don't want to work with a provider anymore, they can take that provider off of their list. Providers will actually also be deactivated based on expired credentials. So that's why it's really important that providers are making sure all of their information is up to date in the new portal. And then we have an update on the Early Intervention Services Trust Enhancement Project. So this project has been put on hold. We do not have an updated release date on this. This is a very big project, so we had to put it on hold. Once we have more information on when it will be live in the Unicorn, we will make sure to keep everyone informed. And if you have questions on this, please go ahead and contact Amanda Sutton, and that is her email address there.
Hi everyone, this is Monica, and I have a couple reminders for you. First off, the EI Colorado statewide meeting that is coming up May 9th and 10th. We are going to be in Loveland at UNC Centera this year. A SurveyMonkey is going to be sent out today to RSVP for your accommodations at the Embassy Suite. And EI Colorado will fund 2 representatives from each of your CCBs. So if you have any questions on the upcoming statewide meeting, please contact me and I can try and answer them for you. And also those that have reached out already and said they wanted to assist in planning the meeting, I'll be connecting with you. But if you're still interested and want to be a part of that committee, please let me know that as well. Another reminder that the Family Assessment Padlet has been created. It's a Padlet that is available for your communities as a resource to provide additional technical assistance, to help with your onboarding of your new service coordinators. And there's resources there that you can use in your community to do ongoing training with this. So there's video examples of both using the SAFER protocol and the FACETS protocol. We hired professionals to do these videos. Actually not. It's me and Lanita and Laura. So you guys get to watch us do the example of a family assessment. So the Padlet address is there for you on the screen, and it also contains all of the PowerPoint slides that we use for our family assessment training and the handouts that we give at that training also when we provide that. So use that as a resource to help with your family assessment. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Christy.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to give an update on legislative activities that are occurring that you all may or may not know. So I want to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening and that we can answer any questions. So the first thing I want to talk about are supplemental requests. And supplemental requests are requests that when we get, mid-year in a fiscal year and we feel like the funding that we have starting out isn't adequate, then we start a process to submit a supplemental request for funding. And that starts actually pretty early in the year. So while it's midway through the year, through our fiscal year, more than halfway through our fiscal year, this work has been happening for quite a while. So we had a supplemental request that were moved forward by the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting, and we call it OSPB. And why I say that those were moved forward by the Governor's Office is that while we put forward a request from the Department of Human Services, we work internally to determine the need, and then our executive director decides that that's something he wants to move forward. We actually have to get it approved by the Governor's Office and provide them with whatever information that they want before they'll move it forward for the legislature to approve. And so it's a big process, and it's a big deal because the Governor's Office has to look at our request and determine whether they feel like they can balance the budget overall, because it'll look different than their original budget that was posted in November, right? The budget, Governor's budget goes live in November. So the first supplemental request that that I'm going to talk about is that we submitted a request for additional funding to cover us for this year, fiscal year 17-18. And that was approximately $2.9 million additional dollars over and above what our budget was for this year. And so part of that was a budget amendment. And what that means is that while we asked for additional money this year, we told them we would still need that money next year and also account for growth. And so this we called our caseload growth, or EI caseload growth supplemental. And so for next year, for 18-19, it's being moved forward that we would get an additional $3.8 million. So that's another $900,000 more for 18-19 than what we'll overall get for 17-18. So it's kind of confusing and it's a long process, but that's where we are as far as asking for funding. And then we also had a funding restriction, and I'm just putting it out there in case you hear it or you see it, because we're going to tell you where you can find details on this. We also have a second supplemental that's asking us to remove a restriction that we have on funding, which caused us to have to decrease some contracts for 17-18, and those will be restored. And that's kind of a technical thing that we had to go through because of the over expenditure that we talked about. Question?
We have a question in the chat. Is the $3.8 million above and beyond the additional $2.9 million requested this year?
No, it's the $900,000 additional. So we're getting an extra 2.9 this year, and then it will grow 900,000 and become 3.8 next year. Does that make sense? Okay, so what I've done is we've given you the link for where you can pull up the details for the supplemental if you're interested. It could be a little lesson on the legislative process, and you can go to the JVC website and you can pull up these documents. And the first link is for it's just an overview of the request that we made. The second link is the actual document, the detailed supplemental document. We don't share these documents because once they leave our office, they become the property pretty much of the Governor's Office and the JVC documents. And so that's where you can find those. And to be clear, these haven't been approved. While they've been put forward, they haven't been approved, and we would anticipate the actual approval and signature so that we can amend contracts and distribute the dollars somewhere in March. We hope in March, possibly April. So on I don't have this on this slide, but there's another, what we call, I don't know what the official name of it, but our JBC legislative analyst will go what we call on microphone, again, in front of the Joint Budget Committee on January 24th, and he will put forward his final recommendations for supplemental requests. So we will send out information to you all as to how you can log on and listen to this if you're interested. Many of you already do this, but we'll go ahead and in our follow-up notes from this call, we can put that in, right? Bonnie, or,
yes.
Okay, somehow we'll do that. Any questions about that? Okay. So the second exciting things that are happening for us this year through the legislative process are the topic of the Part C child find activities. And so during our December 20th Joint Budget Committee briefing, which covered the Department of Human Services Office of Early Childhood and really all of the early childhood in general, our legislative analyst proposed that birth to two evaluation activities be moved from the Department of Education over to the Department of Human Services, specifically under the Office of Early Childhood. And so since that time, we had a lot of requests for information. We call those RFIs, and they were provided to us, and they were provided to the Department of Education. And then we have this process where we answer questions, and they go back, and then we get more questions, they go back. So that pretty much finishes off by January 8th, which was the date of what we call our JBC hearing, and that's where our director, Reggie Bika, presents all of kind of the answers to what we've had, and there's a big document that goes out that shows all of the different questions that we were asked and what our responses were. During our hearing, that would be the opportunity for the Joint Budget Committee to ask lots of questions about any of the suggestions and recommendations that the analyst made earlier in December, and there was very little discussion on this topic. We want to make sure that it's clear that how the legislative process works is that because it was the legislative analyst that made this recommendation, it's not a departmental request. And so we are very kind of far removed from this process, and we answer questions, but we don't have much influence over this at all. And the recommendation, interestingly enough, came, our legislative analyst's name is Vance Roper. Sorry, I should have said that early. And he, and some of you may have met him because he went out to several CCBs over the summer and met CCB staff and he went on some home visits as well, to early intervention visits, which is where he kind of, this rose to the forefront of his interest, and then also heard about our concerns with the Office's special education programs at the federal level, having concerns around our single line of responsibility and our lack of authority over how evaluations occur. I've included a link again for a document that you can look up, and that'll give you all of the different questions that we were asked and the answers that we gave. I'm sorry, I know I'm being long-winded and this is a lot of information, but any questions up to this point? Okay, so what does this mean? This recommendation has been made. A final decision obviously hasn't been made yet. However, this is a passionate topic for Vance, and he's recommending this with lots of enthusiasm, and so we do believe this is likely to occur. So it's likely to occur that child find will be moved over. If any of you were listening to the hearing, Reggie Bika mentioned that he felt like a transition would occur by January of 2019. That's not a date that anybody has discussed or confirmed. That was just a suggestion made, and so we will work with the Department of Education to determine a smooth transition plan. But in the event that this occurs, we need to start our planning now. And so we just wanted to let you know that we are going to begin planning for this change to occur, knowing that at the end of the day, if something happens and it doesn't, it's not going to hurt us to do some additional planning, and we need to make some improvements to our system anyway. So we need to think about a transition plan. How would this work? One of the things we'll need to do is standardize our evaluation tools across the state, and we'll need to pull together stakeholders and get input. And one of the things we're really interested in doing is knowing what you all are thinking and how you're viewing this as an implication to your system. And we want to be as transparent as possible and let you know that we are listening to what your concerns are and addressing them as we move forward. We're thinking of a lot of things, but you can't read our minds, and so you don't know necessarily, the depth of what we're thinking, and the planning we've kind of already done in our minds as well. So you'll see some things go out that are asking you what your questions are and what your concerns or your excitement over how this could be of benefit. We will be dedicating one FTE to this work. We have not had an FTE of a state child find coordinator, and it won't be child find if it moves over under us, but we haven't had any one full FTE dedicated to this work. In all of these years, Lenita spends a lot of her time troubleshooting around these issues that come up, and has worked over the years very collaboratively with our partners at CDE to try and troubleshoot, but we're hoping that we can shift the system in a way that becomes proactive and planful rather than reactive and putting out fires as they come up. And really, at the end of the day, if this does move forward, we strongly believe that families are going to be the ones that reap the greatest benefit, even though it'll be, again, another adjustment, but hopefully not a surprise, because we have been as open as we could, that we've been having these conversations for several years now about what the best move for these evaluation activities would be. And at the end of the day, it's always been a funding barrier that only the legislature has the ability to resolve for us. So any questions?
We do have a question, a couple questions. Are you going to wait to add the FTE until it is approved?
No. We won't be able to dedicate the full FTE, but we will be pulling somebody off their regular work, hopefully, and starting to work on some of these things. That's something we're going to talk about sooner than later. So we will have somebody on our team that will be a contact, and then we figure out how to resolve that long-term moving forward.
So will there be additional funding for CCBs to take over this, or how will that work?
That's one of the things that we have to talk about. Yes, I mean, we've all been very vocal that we cannot do this work without funding. I left out the fact that part of the recommendation made to the legislature was that the program be moved with the funding. And so we believe that the funding would be adequate. Of course, we have to implement it before we know, and part of moving the agreement would be that we would have to collect data on it. Sorry. We would have to collect data on it, and so that we have concrete information coming back if we need additional funding. It probably will not become part of the allocation that's divvied up each year as part of the services. It'll be more of a fee-for-service type activity, because we have to be really clear about what it's costing, and have it a completely separate line. That's probably not very helpful, but that's as much as I know at this point.
What happens when we don't have enough providers to do a multidisciplinary evaluation?
We have some communities that are expressing that as a concern, and we will still have the option. If you have a good collaborative relationship with your administrative units, child find teams, and you guys are wanting to work together and continue using that, those providers to do the evaluations, we will absolutely be able to work with you and help you make that happen. It'll just be a shift in responsibility. While they'll be the providers doing the evaluations, we will have the oversight of how they occur, what tools are used, and they'll have to. It'll just be a shift because we'll have to have authority over their activities.
So we'll have more control over quality, Christy? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's see. What kind of time frame are we looking at?
So again, part of the legislative process is kind of running this through. This would be a bill that would need to be run, and this is a really busy time for the legislature, and so this is when all of those activities are occurring, and we probably won't have any concrete decisions specifically. The bill will have to be drafted, and then they'll have to vote and move it forward. And so again, we're looking at probably March or April before we can say concretely this is done.
And we don't know what kind of time frame we'll have to transition.
Correct.
So I thought the Part C evaluation piece was a quote-unquote carve-out of what Child Find was already responsible for.
So I'll see if I answer the question that you have. So Child Find, in reference to capital C, capital F, Child Find, those Child Find teams' responsibilities are to evaluate and determine eligibility starting at preschool age and all the way up to the age of 21. Many, many years ago, it was put in state statute that they would do the birth through 2 evaluations as well. And there is a bucket of funding that is utilized for that. Did that answer the question?
That answer your question?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Can the governor do an executive order for the change?
No.
That's clear.
I know.
Since this is a recorded call, is there a link so I can replay and confirm my understanding? Yes, this is recorded and posted on our website.
There's a link to the Padlet on our website that has all of the slides posted so that you can access the links, and those should be up within a day or 2.
So I want to back up since you reminded me this is recorded. I'm going to make myself very clear. I'm sure if the governor wanted to, he could do an executive order to move this, but if you're thinking of an executive order that happened to move Part C from one entity to another, that's under federal requirements that the governor is the one that appoints the lead agency. So the Child Find activities are already in federal regulations that they are the responsibility of the lead agency. So we are already responsible for any evaluation activities. We just have no authority over who's doing them. That's the biggest shift. Am I saying that, Lenita, in a way you would agree?
Right, and that is where the complication lies in what we're able to do to impact evaluation activities, because it's what we call that bifurcated system. So while we're ultimately responsible, we don't really have control over that portion of the process.
Right, and it is statute. So now I'm going to go back to my whole thing again and say probably the governor can't do an executive order because it's statute, and so we have to change the statute. And that's a legislative action.
And we've been given no indication that he has an inclination to do it in that way anyway.
Correct.
Here's our question slide. And I want to ask people, it's hard, I just want to say, when we're reading your chats, if our understanding of what you're asking is the same thing of what you're typing. So that's why sometimes it's a little bit unclear. So I just want to reiterate, if you have questions specifically around billing or funding or how those things look, please contact Beth and she can, answer your question or, have a conversation with you to make sure that what you're both saying is the exact same thing. So I want to say that. But does anyone have any other questions about any of the information that was talked about today? All right. Well, thank you all very much for participating in our call. As a reminder, again, this is recorded and will be available to you as well as the slides, and we'll send that information on the follow-up email that everyone gets after these calls so that you can have those links directly as well. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to 2018.
Yay!